Hello and welcome back to the second half of our very, very last day at the National Youth Film and Animation School, and I am joined by the wonderful Tricia Perrott. So Tricia, would you be able to introduce us to what your role is within the industry?
Well, I'm a post-production supervisor. It's a bit of a mouthful for basically saying I sort of production manage the post-production process. So once filming is finished and we move into post-production on a film or a television series, a whole other set of people come on board, and a whole other set of departments, and a different process starts. What I do is I essentially manage that through from the start of picture edit to the very end when we finish and finalize a project. And then another part of my job is to make sure that the finished product, which is not just the film itself, but a lot of elements around that, both technical and legal and paperwork and lots of other elements that are contractually required by a distributor or a sales agent. So the production company who has been contracted by the distributor who fronts up all the money, there's a very detailed contract between them, and they're required to deliver the picture to the distributor, and that is my job, is to make sure that that happens at the end. So generally through the post process, I'm essentially project managing all the different departments in the post-production area, and then I have to manage the delivery to the distributor, to the money, basically. So
yeah,
that's essentially my job.
Yeah. And did you know you were going to end up in that area, Tricia? Was it an area when you were younger? Did you dabble in film?
Not in the slightest. I wouldn't have known what it was, virtually. But I started working in production many moons ago, and I got a job. I got very lucky, and I got a job in a production office. I had done sort of arts administration in just straight out of college and a little bit, but I really wanted to get into film, and so I sort of maneuvered myself and got to know some people, and I got lucky and got a job on a television series in a production office as a sort of a runner trainee, and then I moved on to the first feature film I ever worked on, which was Michael Collins, for Neil Jordan, because that team that had been on the television series moved straight onto Michael Collins, so they brought me with them, and I was essentially an assistant production coordinator. And so I did that for a couple of projects for a few years. But I actually started working with one of Neil Jordan's producers, as his assistant. And so I did that job for a number of years, a producer's assistant, and I was lucky enough to work through to the end of a project, including post-production, while working for that producer. So I started learning about post-production as a producer's assistant. And in those days, which was a long time ago, there wasn't really a role for a post-production supervisor in that way. The post-production would have been managed by the editor. There would have been much smaller teams of people in post-production, and just gradually the processes have expanded and become more complex. And over sort of the last 20 years, my role has been a job that kind of was created as the need arose. And so when I finished, I was working for this producer for a number of years, and then I got called by a production company and asked to do this job. And I had never done the job before, even though I had actually been doing it as the assistant to the producer. So that's how I sort of fell into it by accident, really.
Yeah.
But I guess over the years as well, I have gone back into production. I have produced television, I've produced short films, production managed as well. And so I kind of, it's just a funny one, I've not really gone straight up the mountain. I've sort of gone around the mountain and tested a few different things along the way. But always coming back to post-production because I really like it. I really love it, actually. It's a much more sort of concentrated, and it's a much longer process. And also I love watching the project come together. So you see it really materialize in the post environment, in the post-production environment. So
and alongside that, do you feel like your experience going through from like being able to dabble with the production itself, do you think that aids how you understand and manage it from the post-production side?
It does, definitely. It has helped me. A lot of times you find that production and post-production don't talk to each other, and they don't understand each other. They don't understand what each does, do you know what I mean? So there's a fear of post-production to a certain extent. So I find it's been very helpful for me to kind of cross over between the two, because I do understand production, I do know how it works. And then people in production do sort of come to me, and because post-production is quite technical. There's a lot of technical information, a lot of technical elements involved, and you kind of need, I've learned that over the years, again, just by virtue of having to, and being in there and talking to the tech people. And so I find that my role is often a sort of a conduit between the tech people, who can get real tech savvy, and can get really technical, and the production people who, when they start hearing the tech stuff, they just hear buzzing, they just start panicking. Yeah. So I find I'm a sort of a middle person in between the two of them, and I tend to have to be simplifying a lot of the tech stuff. And I only know the tech stuff from having had to learn it from doing the job. So and I've always just turned around and said to the people who know, please tell me what that is, or please, what are you talking about? I don't understand that, explain it to me. And that's how I've built up my knowledge base in a way.
Yeah, that's really cool. And you didn't go to college to study film. That wasn't
I studied communication studies many years ago, but that was a broad ranging degree course, and it covered lots of things, from journalism to radio production to we even did psychology and photography and lots of different elements. I always wanted to work in film though, and so when I came out of college, I actually did a practical film course for 6 months, which was a brilliant resource to have. But then in those days there was very little production work happening here, and I got into theatre production, and but my degree was not specifically film orientated. So even if you do train in film, and there's a lot of great film degrees now and film courses to do, even if you do train, you have to start off the bottom rung in the industry anyway. And I'm sure everyone else has said that, like, everybody's had to be a trainee in whatever department, in whatever field they're interested in, start in the trainee. And I think that's really a good thing to do, because that's how you learn the practicalities, the day-to-day of the practicalities in each of the departments. And a lot of people tend to jump in and, I'm going to be a director of photography, but you haven't learned the processes, the skills, which give you a great grounding of being a trainee, being a first assistant camera, that all those processes that you learn as you go really stand to you as a director of photography. So, and the same in every department, I think. Yeah. So, it's really good to have the training, because it does help you and gives you an insight before you get into working on the ground on production, and in post-production. But it's really, I think, good to start in the department, learning from people who've learned in the same way as you, and
absolutely, and learn by the people in the space.
Exactly.
Would you be able to demystify further what is happening in a post-production space and what roles exist in that area?
Well, I mean, people are always surprised by how the varied nature of a team in post-production in either feature film or television. Generally, the processes are the same. It's not just editing the picture. It's doing editing the picture is the first stage in the post process. Once you've got a finished product, or mostly finished product, a picture lock as such, so your editor, your director, and possibly your producers have been all together in a room for weeks and weeks and sometimes months, and to get the picture right, then everybody, when they're happy with that, all sorts of other processes then begin. The sound edit has to happen, and in a sound edit department there's many different roles in a sound edit department. Music composing, visual effects, if there's visual effects, and there always is, no matter how simple the film, there now is always visual effects in it. And then finishing the picture, like adding titles, adding, cleaning the picture up, coloring the picture, grading, and then creating the final sort of melded piece where you bring all those elements together and you put them all together and you mix, you do a sound mix and you do a picture finish, and then you put them together and then you have your finished product. So all the way along that process, there's many people involved. So within an editorial, picture editorial, you've got your editor, you would have an assistant editor who would be a person who'd be basically managing the project for the editor. So the editor is responsible for the creative elements of piecing the picture together, and your assistant is managing the process, the software, which is generally speaking Avid. Most editors use Avid or Final Cut Pro or any of those. There's many different versions, but the main professional one is Avid. And then, so you might also have a second assistant editor if the project is big enough and there's enough material, enough work to warrant it. There could be two assistant editors in, or a trainee editor and a first assistant editor. Then in your sound department, you've got a supervising sound editor who's the person who will creatively design the sound, overall sound. You also have other editors in sound who would be a dialogue editor. Sometimes you have an ADR editor. You have a Foley editor. A dialogue editor essentially cleans up all the dialogue through the picture, and identifies whether, say for example, you and I are outside on a noisy street, and a dialogue editor will try and clean up the dialogue, make sure that there isn't anything in the surrounds of the dialogue that is too noisy, or try and pull out all the background noise. If they can't do that, then we do something called ADR, which I'm not sure if anybody's knowledgeable about what that is, but ADR is basically automatic dialogue replacement. And it is a process whereby the actors will come back in, and if a line, for example, of us out on the street is too noisy, we have to then recreate that again. So re-record it.
Oh my God, that
by
sounds
syncing
like
to your lips, and
yeah.
You look at the screen and it wipes across. There's a wipe across, and the dialogue will come up, and the actor has to recreate not just the line, but also the feeling that they had at the time, the sense of it, and often a director wants that exact line exactly the same, and the actor has to redo it and redo it and redo it. And so that's a very big part of a sound edit is cleaning up the dialogue and making sure the dialogue is clean. Then there's a thing called Foley, which I'm not sure if anybody knows.
Yeah, we did a Foley workshop this
Great,
week.
Brilliant. I like that. Who did you do the Foley at?
We did it with an in-house sound engineer, Neville.
Great.
So he brought us through the process of how to make sound.
It's great. That's my most favourite
Really?
part of post-production. It's such fun to see Foley. A Foley artist is an extremely particular a job. It's an amazing job. You walk into a sound studio surrounded by props and everything, and how they recreate, you know, skidding of cars, the somebody slapping someone across the face. They recreate all these noises. Now, the reason they have to do that is because if we're out on the street and our dialogue is, there's traffic passing by us and there's people walking by and you can hear the footsteps and everything. If they separate all of that out and then just have our dialogue, then when it goes to be dubbed in a foreign version, all of that noise around us is gone. So what Foley has to do is recreate all that noise so that in a foreign situation, or if you're dubbing or you're recreating in a foreign language version, they have all of those sound effects at their disposal in the background.
That's amazing.
So that's it's a huge part of the sound design, and it's a great fun thing to watch. So that is another element. So that's all sound. There's the Foley artist, of course, who's the person who will do all the recreation of the sound. And then a Foley editor will take that and will edit it into the picture so that they have separate tracks of all the Foley when they get to a mix situation. Then in sound, you've got the mixers. You've got a re-recording mixer, they're called, and is when all the sound edit is completed, which usually can take from anything from 6 to 10 weeks in a post-production schedule. And we go into a mixing studio with a screen and a big mixing desk, and all of those tracks that all the sound department have put together then get pulled in together, and they balance and they put the music, they add the composed music in, they put music tracks in, and they balance it all together, and that's finalizing the sound. So that's your sound department. Who else? There's the composer. Composer starts generally when there's a picture lock. The composer generally will have a very good relationship with the director and the editor, and will already have been working on themes and recording and ideas. Then when it comes to picture lock, they then start picking out where the director and editor want specific points of music, and they will start composing the music. That then has to be recorded before we get to final mix stage, because that music has to be ready to go into the final mix. Sometimes you could be working on if you're lucky enough, on a film which will have an orchestral score recorded. Again, that's one of my other favorite things to do. Wow. Is to sit and watch an orchestra come in, 40-piece or 20-piece orchestra come in, never having seen the film, never having seen the music, and they sit down and they play this amazing music that goes to the picture. It's amazing. It's such a spine-tingling moment.
That sounds amazing.
So that involves a whole set of musicians as well, and for music. What else is there's visual effects, which I'm sure you've been talking about.
We dabbled with yesterday with Hannah Quinn, who brought us through some of what we wouldn't have even thought of within an actual initial image, but we're watching on screen, of where it's all in action in After Effects.
Great.
But how many people would be in a visual effects department working together then?
It depends on the scale of the visual effects. Some films might have like maybe 20 visual effects shots, or they start out thinking they have 20 visual effects shots. Then they come into an edit situation and the director goes, "What's that alarm box on the wall in the background of a period film, or something like that?" That then has to be removed, and a visual effects artist will do that. It's especially tricky if there's a lot of movement in a shot. That actually happened to me on a TV series, which was a period TV series, and we had a scene in a tram on Mount Street in Dublin, which is beautiful, Georgian Dublin, and the tram was going by and there was alarm boxes on all the houses.
Oh no!
And because the movement, the camera was moving, there was a track, so there was a track of movement. It makes it very tricky to do because because of the movement of the camera. So visual effects artists, they're manifold, and that's almost a whole other discussion to be had. There's so many roles in visual effects. It's a burgeoning area in this country. There's a number of visual effects companies that have been growing in the past sort of 5-10 years, and so they could have at any given time maybe 30 to 150 visual effects artists beavering away at computers. who will do anything from modeling, digital. This is all within a digital realm. So digital modeling, compositing, texturing, like putting kind of fur on Paddington Bear and all that sort of thing, and animating, creating backgrounds. So like if we shoot, I'm trying to think of a situation, we shoot a set that's partly, that's kind of half built, and then it's supposed to have a background of, you know, the Hollywood sign behind it. Then a matte painter will paint in the Hollywood sign behind it. So, and that's frame by frame. So it's a really complex, visual effects is very complex, can take a long time depending on the number of shots and the complexity of the shots in any given film. And so in a post-production environment, you have to take into account that in scheduling, because you know you can't really start your final visual effects until you've got your picture almost edited. Because what if you're still editing away and you've got 50 people doing working on a shot, or 20 people working on a shot which starts out this long in the picture, and if they're still editing, the next thing they cut it to this, they cut it down by 10 seconds or something. All these people have done all this work that wasn't necessary. And I guarantee you that happens on all the Marvel films. They take years to do the visual effects. They take years to come out because of all the visual effects are so complex. And a lot of that has to happen before they almost finish the picture. So it's it's tricky. You have to schedule that in with films that are, or television that is quite visual effects heavy. You've got to schedule that all in as well. So that's visual effects. What else is there? Sound, music. And then there's finishing the picture. There's doing things like putting credits on. So designing the credits, that's another job. It's graphics kind of, it can be. There's, within a post-production facility, you will have online editors who will take your visual effects, take your, they might do all these little tricks to the picture that, you know, the editor has done a zoom in on the picture, whatever, so the online editor will recreate that. That's to create the final master. But prior to that, you've got your colorist who's grading the film, which again, you may have discussed before.
Maybe slightly on our editing day. Dabbled on it.
Yeah, so what that is if during the shoot, they're filming in so many different locations and so many different places on so many different days. One might be a really sunny day, one might be really, you know, cloudy. And then when you get in, it's all cut together, and it may look really disparate, really, you know, disjointed, because it doesn't have an overall look. And so a colorist will come in and work with the director and the director of photography and put a look to it, put you know, certain colors. And I mean, I've worked on a film where the director insisted there was absolutely no blue. So you had to make sure all the blue now, that was decided on the very beginning, so they didn't have any blue on set, so there wasn't any blue. There had to be no blue. And so a colorist has to go through a film and make sure there's no blue. That happens. And there's a very deliberate choice in the director's mind for that. This film was set on Mars, and it's all orange, and red, and that was a very deliberate, creative choice he's making, and so everybody right through, and then the final colorist at the end will make sure that was followed through. Exactly.
And with that, does there ever come a point within your role when you're fighting kind of maybe artistic differences alongside your logistic, the train has to keep running, we won't be able to get this done? How do you balance that without throwing fists around the place?
Well, there's often fists around. But you know, ultimately the battle is always the creative vision of the directors, and achieving that in the budget you have, and also in the schedule you have. Sometimes in a schedule of post-production, there is an end date, and usually it's to do with, you know, a film is going to be distributed at a festival, is going to Cannes, is going to you know, Galway Film Fleadh is going. So that's always good to have that focus, because everyone has to kind of focus everything, and it funnels down to that date. There's of course there's always compromise. I've never worked on any project where the director, everyone has had to compromise one way or another. And also every job I've done is different. There's always different obstacles, different issues to contend with, and each film and each television series is different. I work on both, and they're very different, but each project will always present something new, something different. But yeah, there's how you manage that, the creative differences. It's a delicate balance. You know, like for example, I worked on a television series called Titanic: Blood and Steel, and there was massive amounts of visual effects in each episode. It was a 12-part television series, and it was about the building of the Titanic. So it was kind of the 3 years leading up to the Titanic. And so over the period of the episodes, the ship in the shipyard is growing. And so that was being done by mostly visual effects. And of course, there were so many visual effects shots in the episodes. The schedule wasn't going to allow. The schedule was so tight. It was going to be a clash of being able to achieve what the director wanted. And so he had to come up with a compromise, which really worked very well, where one shot was chosen as a kind of a key moment shot for each episode, and the visual effects department then built the stages of the ship in the one shot, and it was easier. So it was easier for them to do that because that one shot was used all the way throughout, and they were able to start work before they even finished editing episode 12. They were able to do the shot for episode 12. So we were able to manage the schedule in that way. So this was a sort of you're always trying to come up with problems, ways to solve the problem in a creative way that keeps everyone happy, including the director, who's obviously the creative driving force. So that's kind of my job a lot of the time, is to come up with solutions.
Yeah, the solution finder.
Yeah, problem solving is my job actually, because it's always, that's the main key element, I think, to my job is problem solving.
Is there any other key attributes or skills that you think are important within the post-production side that possibly people have to, when going into that, have those in mind about what the job entails and what's going to be required of you?
Well, I think problem solving is actually a really good skill to have, no matter what, in whatever department you work in, across both production and post-production, because so many things will be thrown at you every single day, where you have to realize, okay, I can't do it the same way I've done it before. How do I achieve what the director wants me to achieve, without being able to do what I've done before? So I think everybody has to have that skill of thinking on your feet and coming up with clever solutions to problems, because you know, for example, you're halfway through a production and you find yourself in a global pandemic where everybody has to work from home. I mean, this is a really interesting kind of moment to be even talking about this, because that everybody in the industry had to go, hang on, how do we do this? How do we finish? I was halfway through a television series that had to be finished and was going on screen within the month, within 6 weeks of the lockdown. So these are things that everybody had to team together and go, okay, my job is this, but so how do I achieve this for the production in with these constraints and in these. So problem solving, I think, is a really good skill to have. The other key skill, certainly my job, but across the board, is communication and an ability to not be just concentrating your own. Everyone has their own sort of job to do, but to also know that they have to take into account all these other people who have their jobs to do, and that all has to work seamlessly together. And so communication, a lot of my job is making sure all the departments are talking to each other, and everybody knows what everyone's doing and when they need it and when it needs to move on, and follow the schedule. Is this schedule going to work for you? And it's a constant communication movement of information, essentially. So good communication is and to not be afraid of that, and to be assertive of it. If you can smell a problem down the line in your area that's going to affect someone, you put your hand up and say, hang on a second, this might not work, or this, and not be afraid of that. Yeah, and be assertive and self-starting as well, I think, is another. Because often all these people in their different departments in post-production, they're working away on their own sort of thing, that they have to have the episode finished, or their part of the dialogue edit done, and to feed into the ADR when the cast are coming, and you're bringing in a cast from LA at huge expense, and they've got one day before they fly to Australia and start their next film. And so you've got to be constantly sort of moving and knowing that knowing your own limitation, your own job, and how long those things take and stuff. So that comes back to the training side of it, because it's crucial to learn that, and and in all the departments in post-production, there's training. There's a trainee editor usually. There's a trainee sound in the sound department. Then in post facilities, they always have runners who often specialize then in an area, because a post facility will cover a lot of ground in different areas of post production, and so there's plenty of opportunities for work in those environments, basically.
Yeah. And do you feel like, for me, just listening to you, feels like you're connecting what seems like a disjointed process? So we've had a lot of discussion all week about the production side and about communicating and operating as a team. That doesn't leave when you're a Foley and you're, I'm a Foley artist, I'm by myself. There's still that.
Absolutely.
Like interdependency.
For sure. And in the post-production process, there's a lot of things that can't happen until the previous thing has finished. So, there's a chronological element to a post-production schedule, and so all those people need to be feeding each other, and they need to be talking to each other in order to do that. And so working as a team is crucial. Absolutely, really is. And then often in post-production, the team can be all over the world. Your editing team may be in LA, and your sound team is in Dublin, and your visual effects department are in Denmark, and so there's that as well, to keep everybody communicating in that way. That's a challenge. That can be a challenge.
I can imagine. Yeah. And different time scales.
Absolutely, all of that. Yeah.
We'll see if we can jump to some of the questions coming in from the young people. So we have Adam asking, how do you keep passionate and motivated in a particularly long post process?
Good question. That's a very good question. Yes, it can get long. Like a post schedule might start out at being maybe a feature film might be finished. Originally their schedule is 6 months. It becomes a year. Often that happens. What keeps me passionate usually is watching the project come together. It's a great stage of the whole filmmaking process, is to see a picture be edited, and you might see a very early cut, a rough cut, say, for example, and then 6 weeks later you see a better, a more fine-tuned cut, and then it goes out to producers who then feed back notes, and everybody gets in a room and then they start cutting further, and the next thing, the final cut might be completely different to the first cut you saw. So I love that process. That really gets me energized. And then you see the sound team come in and they start laying in all these, laying sound that, makes you jump out of your seat in a scary movie and those kind of things. And you just see it all come together. Then watching the music be laid in, it's each stage of the post-production process keeps me energized, actually, and that's how I stay passionate, because the more you see as the stages unfold, you can see it come together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle that you're seeing being put together. It's great. Yeah. That's actually what keeps me passionate, even if you're dealing with problems at every stage of the way. But when you see it all come together creatively like that, it's great.
Yeah. There's another really good one here. Ryan had asked, what are the ingredients of an award-winning short film in your opinion?
Oh, wow. That's a tough question. Award-winning short film. To me, no matter whether it's a short film, a TV series, a feature film, when you've got a good script and then you've got a good team together who have a great symbiotic relationship and communication across the board, and that is often when magic happens. And if you've got a really good script and you've got great cast, and then you pull to get a good director and DOP and it looks gorgeous, and then you get a brilliant composer on board, and all of a sudden you've got this amazing piece. It is building blocks, but generally I think if a team have a good symbiotic relationship with a great story, that's what will bring it together. Yeah.
We'll jump to a piece of work and possibly maybe The Room first.
Yeah, sure.
As a film that you worked on, and we might have a little conversation about that afterwards.
Truck, wiggle out, jump, run, somebody.
I'm scared.
I know. I'm gonna be there in your head talking to you the whole time.
Truck, wiggle out. Jump when the truck slows down. Run, somebody.
You alright? Jack, listen to me. This is our chance.
Thank you for letting us do this interview. We're grateful to hear your story.
Thank you to everyone who sent their good thoughts and their prayers.
For 5 years, you made life in that small room, that prison, as nurturing and normal as you could.
Mom, I'm 5. You're 5.
So old now. You are so old now.
Yep.
Hey, do you know what we're gonna do today?
What?
We are going to bake a birthday cake.
You chose to tell Jack that room was the whole world, that there was nothing else.
Good morning, lamp. Good morning, plant. Good morning, sink.
I wanted him to feel safe and that it was a great place for him to live.
Did you ever think you would be free?
I hoped.
Hello, Jack. Thanks for saving our little girl.
Are we in another planet?
Mm-mm. Same one, just a different spot.
No matter how sweet the
I've been in the world 37 hours.
That's us.
we push.
I've seen windows and hundreds of cars and birds and grandma and grandpa.
Jack, someone here would like to meet you.
Will he find us?
No, he will never find us.
Everyone keeps asking, are we okay?
You have no idea what's going on in my head.
Yeah, well, try me.
And every time you look at me, that's all that you see?
When I look at you, Joy, I will see my daughter.
You're gonna love it.
What?
The world.
So we are back. Tricia, you might be able to talk us through working on that particular project and what made it such a good dynamic and a good team.
Well, in post-production, working with Lenny Abramson's it's a great honor, of course, and he has a great shorthand with his post-production team. He works with the same editor that he's been working with for many years. His sound team, he always wants to work with the same people, and so and his composer the same, his colorist. So he has a shorthand almost with with the team. They all know each other. They all talk to each other. There's a constant stream of creative discussions going on all the time. It's great to work with him. He's obviously brilliantly creative, and then his team, bring each of them individually bring creativity to the table, which Lenny really values, and so that is a team, as a true team of a creative that creates this brilliant, beautiful creative piece. So Room was, it was great to work on. It was very intense. Obviously, their shoot was very intense because of the nature of what they were shooting, and they shot in Canada, and then came back to Ireland for post, so it was a long editorial process, which Lenny likes, because he likes to try things, and then pulling it together, and then we were also then pulling it together for a date as well, in that classic way that there was an end date of a release date, and so we were working within those constraints, but it was very well planned in advance. Everything was planned, and in a way that's crucial in post-production is to have the discussions about post even in prep before you start your production. I always say it's important for the post-production team, the creatives especially, to have discussions with the creatives of production, like the DOP, like the production designer, that everybody, that they're not separate teams, that they're all considered to be one team, and that they all talk to each other. So yes, Lenny has a particularly great way of communicating because he has that shorthand with his team. So it was a great film to work on, and then there was a lot of excitement about it, and so there was a sort of a build-up as well as we were working through post-production. There was a build-up of the expectation, and the Yes distributor was very excited about it, and so yeah, it was an exciting project to work on, even though it was very intense because of the nature of it,
yeah.
and the subject matter. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a really good question actually here. Has being involved in post-production changed the way you enjoy films? For example, knowing that the post-production crew maybe struggled or had a heavier, stressful workload.
I don't know about enjoy. I wouldn't say enjoying is the word I choose necessarily. I can tend to annoy people by sitting there going, "Oh, I can see a bad VFX shot there," or I do tend to do that, which annoys people no end. So it certainly makes me appreciate the scale of a project. I can see where there would have been difficulties to, sometimes, and the whole point of it is that you are creating a piece that is there for enjoyment, and therefore you shouldn't be seeing or noticing things that, and that's my job, is to make sure that those things are, any issues with picture or sound or anything are literally stripped away and pulled away, and that you don't notice it. And actually, I love film so much, I don't notice it if I'm engaged in a story. If the story's good, you're halfway there anyway. So
yeah, it's actually something that came up on our first day. We were talking to Paul Walker, the scriptwriter, and he had said he hates when he can see his words on screen, when he's like, "Oh, that's me," and he wants to get lost within the stories and the character. And it's just mad when you come to post-production, you can start spotting things that you're like, oh, I want to get out, I want to actually experience it full bodied.
Exactly. And really our job in post-production is to make sure that the cinema experience or the even watching the project on television is an immersive experience, that you're engaged in the story and you're not noticing all those other things that the tricks. They are tricks, you know.
Yeah.
You know, visual effects is a trick, as my aunt once said. Oh, so you're lying? Yeah, I suppose it's a type of a lie. You know, where you put the giraffe in that wasn't there when you shot it. Do you know what I mean? They're tricks, but they should be so engaging in its story and its look and its sound and everything that you don't even think about that.
Yeah.
So that's ultimately what post is doing, is pulling all those tricks together and making it an overall immersive, wonderful experience.
Absolutely. And the way we kind of work with young people and explain how a script can change, because a lot of these, we would hope these young people would go away and create their own ideas, that something that they could maybe work on collaboratively with friends and other filmmakers may change within the production and then again in the post-production. And I think we're all probably a little bit more familiar with how it changes within a production side. But what do you see as like the striking things for you that come up in a post-production side for, say, script changes and story development? Well,
it's as simple as a chronological script goes from your scene 1 to scene, 75 or whatever it is, and then what happens in the early stages of editorial is that the editor puts the script together in chronological order, is the way it's been written, and then everybody sits and goes. And usually, inevitably, it goes, well, that doesn't really work, does it? And so then the editor's job is to go, okay, with the directors, how can we pick this apart and make it work? How will we make it, interesting? How do we make it exciting? How do we make it scary? How do we make it, you start picking things apart, and that's when things fall out and end up on the cutting room floor, in that classic term, and or whole strands of a story, a sub-story or whatever, disappears. It's not necessary. Everybody goes, actually, this part of the story is what's interesting. It's the editorial process, the picture editorial process is recreating the story, actually, and to make it something new. And what I always say is, don't be afraid of that. Don't be tied so tight into this script that's on the page, because it'll change, and then it'll change again, and it'll change again, and then bringing sound to it will change it again, bringing music to it will change again. So that's why I say it's amazing to see the changes. For me, I love to see how it can change across the process in post.
Yeah, and does it, I won't say does it happen, but when you're in that intense environment, when you're trying to curate a story for it to make the best sense alongside the director, how do you balance that kind of, maybe those long hours, the story that doesn't make sense, or has the plot holes? How do you curate that without losing, as came up earlier, that motivation of having those holes that you're trying to fix under pressure?
Well, I mean, that's when it can get tense, if there's something kind of not working and there's holes. Sometimes and often, you have to go back in and do some more shooting, sometimes that's even expected before you get into the post process. Some directors like to work like that, where they know that they're going to come back and they're going to edit for a while, and then they come back and do a bit more shooting to, because they like the fluidity of that, and they like one to feed the other and then to feed back in, and that's why I'm saying every single job is different.
Yeah,
there's never one the same. It'll never go seamless according to what I expect. I'll do a schedule and go, there's your first schedule, and I guarantee you there's another 10 thereafter before you finish the picture. So that's what makes it interesting, actually, is to find if something's not really working the way it was expected to, and it might have read really well on a page, and then it's the process of picking it apart and remaking the jigsaw, actually, and that's really interesting. That's and it's challenging and creatively challenging as well for the creatives, you know. So it's that's how you kind of stay motivated. Is going, how are we going to? Okay, you're thinking on your feet all the time, and
yeah, that kind of dynamic attitude that you have to go in with. There's been discussion throughout the week about the differing kind of aspects between TV and film, and what you should be drawn towards more. Would you, from like a post-production side, what are the biggest differences between the post-production within TV and the post-production within film?
Time, really. So a feature film has a nice length of time in post, generally, to allow it to breathe, allow each stage of the creative process to breathe. In television, generally speaking, you don't have the budget and you don't have the time because it's being transmitted in 2 months' time, and so you have to finish. And often it's if it's series, if it's a TV series, it's chronological, and you have to finish. You might have finished first episode and it's on the television, and you're still working on episode 6 of an 8-part series or something, and you're still working on episode 5, and episode 1 is out on the television already. It's being broadcast. So time is it completely conflates in post-production and television. It's totally, you're under much more creative pressure because you don't have the time that you can give in a feature film post situation where you can allow it to breathe.
Yeah, that delivery, you're already giving them their story and their narrative.
Exactly.
With that expectation to be able to continue doing that.
Exactly.
I'd love to jump over to another film to watch. My name is Emily, which is another really interesting one that I'd love to talk through, but we might throw that on now.
I was born of contrary winds. They name hurricanes after me. My name is Emily.
Then what seems to be the problem?
I just don't want to do what you've asked.
What's wrong with you? Break.
Leave her alone.
I can take care of myself, thanks. So, Dr. Golding, Dad, why didn't you tell me?
Nothing can separate us.
No, he's my dad!
Emily, sometimes people just break.
I got you this because I wanted to help you feel better.
The other day you said you wanted to help me.
What is it?
My father's in a psychiatric institution and I'm going north to break him out of the nut house that they've put him in. Will you help me? Can we go any faster?
No. So what is the plan?
I go in to visit him, you cause distraction. Will I get him out?
That's it.
Yeah. Go!
Are you lost? No.
Why'd you really say yes to this? Was it just so you could stick your hand up my t-shirt?
Is that what you believe?
People lie. People leave.
Not everyone lies. Some people just help. You asked me to be here, and I care if you live or die.
Life happens quickly, and you wonder, how did I get here?
We are back. So Tricia, oh yes, my granny used to have the same yellow car. So
Eva was saying,
get that off my chest.
I know that car.
So would you be able to explain, you said that was a unique process in post-production, and could you explain a little bit to the young people watching of what that process was like?
Well, the director, Simon Fitzmaurice, was, he was in a wheelchair and communicated through a computer. And so it was a very challenging and interesting process, which actually became really a brilliant eye-opener for all of us, and as in exactly the way I'm saying every project is different, this was a very different, unique project, because everyone had to adapt to a different way of working because of the director and the working around his requirements. And it was a fascinating and very creative process as a result, because everything slowed down and everything was given more time, and we all were able to step back, and there wasn't a constant, so once you realized and had to embrace it, it took a bit of getting used to, because we're all used to in both in production and in post-production, just going. And so once we got used to that as a necessity, it became a lovely creative process as a result. And because we were all very invested with Simon and the cast, and it was a very unique experience in that sense. Yeah. And each step had to be very well planned, and was very sort of worked through in advance, actually, and then as I said, it took its time in the process, and was really nice. It was a lovely experience for everyone. Yeah.
Do you think it changed anything moving forward with the way you approached projects, or did it give you any insight just with, I suppose, the kind of inclusivity of being able to adapt an environment for somebody with those
Well, it
challenges?
makes you realize that you can, that the whole process, the processes don't have to follow the norm every single time. We don't have to go, it doesn't have to be done that way, even though people say it has to be done this way. It doesn't. In the same way as what this last few months has done, is actually what we're all used to doing it this way, but in fact we ended up having to do it a completely different way. And it just shows you it can be done, and it was done, and it's a really good learning process because it then changes. It can change the environment in the future, and so we find that we don't have to work that way. It can be worked in another way. So it makes people more flexible, I think. Yeah, and to realize that can be done.
Yeah, and would there be any? We're just going to the closing minutes there. Anything that stands out within your career, or what advice would you give to young filmmakers progressing into the industry?
I always say, when I'm asked in these situations, to not to be afraid to put yourself out there, to pick up the phone and phone people. Watch loads of films, watch loads of television, find out what you love, and do what you love. And like if you're good at sound, if you're good at music, there's so many varied jobs you can do in the film industry that you can find your niche and put yourself out there and contact people who are doing that. Contact people that you admire, and don't be afraid of that. Because people really appreciate that initiative, actually, especially in this industry, because it needs initiative. It needs people who have the initiative and assertiveness to pick up the phone and say, hey, listen, I really love your work. I'd love to work with you, or I'd love to sit down and have a cup of coffee and you get your advice. And people really appreciate that. And Absolutely. So that's what I would recommend starting off to do. And don't be afraid to start at the bottom as a trainee and learn the craft.
Yeah. So. And do you have any standout moments where you're proper chuffed? You're I've done, whether it's going through a project that was particularly tough and getting to the end of it and seeing the end of it, or overcoming different challenges, or being able to balance personalities in a space and come out of it and still want to go into the same work. And alongside that, I think, is possibly dealing with burnout. Is that something, especially with a tight-packed project?
Totally.
Toward the end?
Well, I mean, most recent project, Normal People, chuffed that when I sat and watched it on the television and went, wow, we actually got it there. in going through the tight squeezes we went through by shutting down, going into lockdown, before we'd finished the post-production process on that. So that was a real challenge. And so to be able to look at it and see it on the television, that was a moment where and then it was such a huge success. So that's a real moment where you go, I'm proud.
Pat on the back.
Yeah, I'm proud. You know, and then there's projects that I'm proud to have worked on, like My Name is Emily, for all sorts of reasons. It's a lovely project as well. And working on Room, and working on, you know, my favorite projects to have worked on. You know, I'm really thrilled I had that opportunity to work with those people and to work with those brilliant minds and brilliant creative people. So yeah,
that really sounds it. I'll see if I can jump to, okay, so at what stage is the project handed over to from post crew to marketing, and is there ever pressure to have a certain scenes or shots in line for a trailer?
Definitely. God, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Yes, it happens all the time that maybe, you know, you're only a month into editing and your marketing department are jumping up and down for a trailer, especially on things that have got good buzz going. You know, if there's a certain, you know, if there's cast in it that they want to put, you know, they're excited about, or, you know, it's something like Normal People or Room and Frank with Michael Fassbender in it. They're always looking, and that's actually a challenge, is to give them what they want to sell the project, but also to that you're not giving them stuff that ends up on the cutting room floor, because at that stage you're not even finished your edit. So that's a challenge. Timing is a challenge in all those things. Yeah.
I think we've ended on quite a logistical question, but important nonetheless. I just want to say, Tricia, a huge thank you from Young Irish Filmmakers for your time.
Thank you, and I wish everybody good luck.
Yes, absolutely, and to all the young filmmakers who are watching.
Our future film industry.
To say a huge thank you for that time and the support of being able to give your advice
I hope it was,
the way you have.
I hope it was helpful in some way.
Yes, well, through all the input that's come through here, I would say definitely.
Great.
So I think all we have to do is wave goodbye for the moment.
Thank you.
And say a huge thank you. So bye.